Good to be here and learn more about small business privacy. Having owned a number of small businesses myself, it's always been a fun challenge. I would like to know, if possible, what you think most small businesses don't know and should about privacy. I mean, but not just terms, but also terms, and then kind of broadening out between how they should think about this normally without getting totally overwhelmed.
Sure. So I think there's a couple kind of, I would say, misconceptions that small businesses have about privacy. So I would say the first misconception is that, I'm a small business, so I don't have to comply with privacy laws, or privacy laws don't apply to me, or there's no way that I will get fined or sued for privacy law violations. So part of it is correct in the sense that there are quite a few privacy laws that don't apply to small businesses. So if you are a small business as defined by the Small Business Administration, if you're collecting the personal information of less than a certain number of people, or if you're making us under a certain amount of annual revenue, like under 25 million, it is true that some privacy laws will not apply to you. But there's also a lot of privacy laws that do apply to small businesses. So they don't really care what revenue you make, how much data you're collecting, how much data you're selling, or who you're sharing it with, or things like that. So there's some privacy laws that will apply as soon as you collect the personal information of a resident of a state through a contact form or an email newsletter submission form or Google Analytics. There's also been a lot of small businesses that have been fined for privacy law violations. So, while we look at the news, you'll only see like multi-million or multi-billion dollar fines, but there's actually a lot of small business shops that have been fined, whether they have one employee or it's just the founder. So if you look at enforcementtracker.com, you'll actually see all GDPR fines to date. And you see that a lot of those have been applied to small businesses or people that are not even a part of a business at all. And with the California Invasion of Privacy Act, we're seeing a lot of businesses getting sued for tracking people online through like Google Analytics or the Metapixel without their consent. And a lot of small businesses have received demand letters or have been sued for those practices. So small businesses are not exempt from laws, and they're also not exempt from enforcement either. And I would say that that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I see.
That's a good one. Okay, so some laws do apply, some laws don't. It would be a tough question to ask, well, which ones do, because there's probably too many to name, but what are the main things that these founders can now do now that they're saying, okay, well, this does apply to me, what can I do?
Yeah, so like you said, the first thing is figuring out which privacy laws apply to you because that's what dictates the requirements that you're subject to. So, it doesn't really matter where your business is located. You should ask yourself, whose personal information am I collecting? Who's visiting my site? Where am I offering goods or services? Where do I ship to? Where are my customers located? Things like that. And those are used to figure out which laws apply to you. And then figuring out what those requirements are. So like, do you need a cookie consent banner on your website? And what does that banner need to say or do? If you're collecting personal information, you'll probably need to have a privacy policy. Based on the laws that apply, what disclosures does that policy need to contain? And how do I keep it up to date? And things like that. And then also figuring out, what kind of terms disclosures do you need? Do you have commenting available on your website? Do you have e-commerce? Are you selling subscriptions? Do consumer protection laws apply to you depending on where you're selling and things like that? So that would probably be the next step, is getting your policies and then your cookie consent banner in order.
Okay. You mentioned the metapixel. Is that a more common offender than other pixels as far as privacy violations go?
Very common offenders would be any Google products. So like Google Analytics, because that's collecting a lot of data,
Mhm.
advertising pixels, because those are collecting a lot of data as well. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that. IP intelligence tools is a big one too. You have to get consent for those, especially in California, EU, UK, Canada, places like that. for small business owners, one of my main pieces of advice is figuring out, do you actually need this stuff? So we speak to a lot of business owners on a daily basis about their privacy practices. And a lot of them were like, yeah, we installed the Google Analytics, and then I don't even know how to log in and view the data, or I'm never logged in and view the data. Well, if you're not viewing the data, if you're not making decisions based on that data, maybe you shouldn't have that on your site at all, because it requires you to get consent. People don't necessarily love it. It can subject you to additional privacy laws that you may not be otherwise subject to. So just, think, do I actually need this? And if you do actually need it, there are privacy friendly alternatives like Matomo or Fathom Analytics that you could use instead, which may be a good option. But if you're not actually using this data, if you're not advertising to people, if you're not making decisions based on it, just remove it from your site, because those are very high risk products.
Interesting. And do you know if GA4 is better? Because I know they kind of ripped a bunch of stuff out of GA4 versus classic Google Analytics, I think for that reason. But did that take care of it more or not totally?
So my beef with Google is that it's almost impossible to find reliable privacy information. So if you try to find, like, what data does Google Analytics 4 collect, you'll get 500 different answers or 500 different pages. And it's almost impossible to figure out what's actually being collected, what's being done with that data, who it's being shared with, where it's being transferred to. So it's really hard to say. I mean, they do say that they anonymize IP addresses, but before anonymization, what happens to them, where are they sent? Nobody
Mm.
really knows. So that's why I try to stay away just from those products in general, because they can be risky and it's really hard to find appropriate privacy information. And they're also really high target for enforcement authorities. There's been so many lawsuits about this. There's been so many enforcement actions about this, that, unless you're truly actually using that data and you truly actually need it, it's probably not worth getting caught up in that net, at least in my opinion.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Fathom. I wonder, Post Hog is probably another can of worms, but there's so many other tools out there that
Yeah.
that do this. Okay, so is Termagen helping with just the term side of things, also with the privacy? And then do you have other
Yeah.
recommendations for complementary tools that go along with Termagen that can help kind of address this more holistically?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do privacy policies, terms, disclaimers, ELAs, cookie policies, and the cookie consent tool. So what we do is we ask you a series of questions. So the first set of questions figures out which privacy laws apply to you. So we have the privacy law identifier. And then the remainder of the questions are based on the disclosures or requirements of those laws. And once you answer those questions, you'll get the policy texts and the cookie consent banner embed code. And then those embed codes go on your site. And that's what allows us to update the policies for you. So we track changing laws, rules, regulations, enforcement actions, and through the embed codes, we automatically update your policies for you. So that we're not just a solution for getting your policies in place right now, but also for keeping them up to date through time.
Okay, interesting. So that's a little bit broader than I thought. I think I heard Termagen and I sort of assumed it was just like updating TOS and privacy docs, but
Yeah, people assume we're just terms, but it is the whole suite of policies. But depending on where your business is or what laws apply to you, there are a lot of really great resources from data protection authorities or privacy commissioners. This does not apply in the United States. So in the U.S., our resources are non-existent. So good luck with that. But
yeah.
in other countries, like for GDPR, UK DPA, if you have questions about it, like what's the consent legal basis and how do I use it and what's the right way to obtain consent, your governments have a lot of really great resources on the privacy laws and their requirements too.
That does have a nice feeling to it, thinking about just being European and having all those resources and all that
Right?
consent based for marketing. I know that in our HubSpot, I always log the type of consent given, even if it's just somebody that didn't come from the website, just because it feels better for me that way.
Yeah.
Well, now we should probably migrate to Termageddon. And because we have some sort of thing plugged in, but I don't know if it's working exactly well. I tested it a few weeks ago, but it's certainly not all in one with our TOS and privacy policy that we made ourselves. So That's great. I'm hoping more people, especially the marketing focused founders that I know, are able to sign up for this because they're probably creating a lot of risks that they don't know about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of, we met through LinkedIn because you launched a new product,
Hmm.
ViewExport. And I personally found it very interesting because working in privacy, we do, we hear about like data subject access requests,
Hmm.
or you hear about companies who need to produce evidence based on certain conversations in Slack. Or maybe a customer asks you to delete their data, and like one of the things you have to do is check Slack to see, did I Slack this particular ticket to the support person or whatever. So tell me a little bit about View Export and what it does.
That's pretty much exactly the main things that our customers came to us. We're pretty new to the business. You've been in Termagant for several years. We really launched less than a year ago, but that's the initial set of use cases. Is they either need to produce ESI from Slack, basically saying what relevant to this investigation or audit happened on Slack or was discussed on Slack, and then DSARS is the other main one. If you're in the EU or UK and you have the equivalent, then you're going to get several of these per month if you're large enough, if not more, and just need to deal with them within 30 days flat. And then if you are trying to search Slack yourself, just kind of punching in names manually, you're gonna have a bad time trying to find what you need. So View Export just makes that process much easier and faster and remains secure. So we're not plugging into Slack and making permanent backups of everything. You're taking your Slack export files, putting them into View Export, and then you have a secure environment with an audit trail that's kind of locked down where you can search. That way you don't have to, for example, have legal and HR join a private channel directly in Slack to find what they need in the case of an investigation, which obviously, if you've been at a large corporation and the head of legal and HR both join your private channel, then that sets off alarm bells you may not want to set off.
Yeah.
So that's the main things people come to us for, is that e-discovery and the DSARS, which is a little bit similar use case.
How does that work for like legal hold? So let's say there's an employee who, I don't know, like sexually harassed another employee through
Mhm.
Slack. I need to place like a legal hold on the conversation. Do I upload it into View Export and I can hold it in there just so that, let's say that employee has access, they could delete messages in their Slack, but I could use View Export to pull them up again.
Exactly. So if you have Slack Enterprise, you can implement a legal hold in place where it'll lock down the messages from a current scope. But if you don't, which I'd say most Slack customers don't, and even if you do, it's still a good idea to put a permanent copy of that in View Export so that it's immutable, it can't be touched. And we've actually had that specific case come up before, inappropriate relationships or harassment cases, and they're using the Slack data specifically for that. And it can get tricky because, well, you're kind of at the point in the game of reading into whether something that was said means something else. And then
Mm,
just being able to, we don't have anything that's AI driven yet to be able to answer those types of questions. But what we're thinking about with respect to privacy is how do we make sure that any AI usage we do implement to help people answer those questions of like, what does this mean that? Can you find other instances of this? Stays private and doesn't go to any LLM servers that we don't want it to go
yeah.
to. So that's the main reason why we think we're a little bit cautious about AI and e-discovery for that reason.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the type of thing they would do, is put a permanent copy and then search privately, in this case by hand. But we're seeing a lot of e-discovery providers talk up their AI capabilities in this way, and kind of like you, we're a little bit nervous about privacy on that front. So
Yeah.
yeah, has that come up for you at all too? Just the kind of AI e-discovery privacy side of things?
Yeah, so AI comes up a lot in my work and the American Bar Association. Everybody's really worried about it and really curious about it. It can do a lot of things, but we also don't necessarily want that sensitive material to end up as training data because, as you know, once it does, you can't pull it back.
Yeah.
So AI has a lot of issues when it comes to privacy because your prompts or your answers can be given to others, it can be used as training data. with some of the more unscrupulous AI companies, it could even be sold. If the AI company doesn't have proper security measures in place, it could be breached, sold on the dark web, and all those other things. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is locally hosted AI. So the ability to use AI without those particular privacy issues, and you still have to do due diligence on those AIs, just like you would any other vendor. But it can be done in a privacy friendly way. So I think it's possible, but it's hard. And a lot of companies nowadays don't take the approach that you do, which is, hey, let's think about the consequences of this first. And they just implement AI tools and think, okay, this would be great for our customers. And then the customer's like, hey, I didn't realize that, this basically, eliminates my chance of complying with privacy laws now.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I wonder too if a lot of these types of trigger happy product developments are less for customers and more for investors.
yeah.
Because often, kind of like you alluded to, I find that customers often don't really, at least for us, come to us for AI capabilities. I don't think they
Mhm.
come seeking out AI something. They just come seeking to do whatever workflow or job that is that your software or product does. If
Yep.
there's any AI involved and it makes it easier, great. But then I also hear about, if a company's publicly traded, the moment you announce anything related to AI, you get a stock price bump. And so I wonder about the incentives on the AI, not just CapEx in general, but maybe the overuse of announcing AI related things.
Yeah, and a lot of times it doesn't even really do anything that
Yeah.
you couldn't have done with the product otherwise. Like you
Right.
could have just done this as was, but you added AI just to make it seem cool. What's interesting too is that at least in our field, so we don't use AI at Termageddon. It's powered by human intelligence, but we get tickets saying, hey, I need to talk to somebody and I refuse to talk to an AI. Like I want to talk to an actual person. I'm like, great, you're in the right place because we don't use AI to
Yeah.
like answer support tickets. It's all like real people. But it seems like companies don't want it as much as they used to, or people who are conducting due diligence, they ask you, hey, are you using AI? And you say no, and you could hear like the relief sigh at the end of the line. Oh, great, awesome. Like I don't want it to use AI. So
Hmm.
not everybody wants it, and not everybody wants it as an opt-in, as an opt-out either. So people would prefer to say, okay, you have AI features. I can turn these on if I want to, but I don't want them to be turned on by default.
Hmm.
And I can say personally, I've been very frustrated by tools that turn on AI by default. And then I have to go through like 50 settings pages to be able to turn it off. It's very frustrating.
Right. It
Yeah.
seems like overall with both of our products, the sprawl of things people have to care about now that they didn't, even in terms
Hmm.
of just the amount of
Yeah.
tools at your disposal, right? That you didn't have to deal with.
Right.
It was harder to launch a small business. You had to, get a location, get a loan, go to the bank and all those things. And so the bar is lower now,
Hmm.
but also the complexity is so darn high. We
Yeah.
have to keep track of much more than we used to. Um,
Yep.
and even things just like the amount of tracking platforms and pixels out there and what they can all do without telling us, and the amount of information we would have to keep in our heads is starting to get kind of a lot. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't think more AI tools is the answer. I think it might be almost part of the problem in some ways.
Hmm.
So I'm appreciative of companies like Termageddon, the work you're doing that are on maybe the side against entropy in all this, helping keep a little bit of order with human intelligence in the process. So
Yep.
big
Yeah.
kudos to you for that.
Yeah. I wish a machine could replace me, but unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way yet.
No.
One more thing that I wanted to touch on here, as somebody who runs a privacy company, and I think a lot of people have to do this, whether you're in privacy or not, is vendor due diligence, right? You want to use a new vendor and you have to look them up. You have to look up their privacy practices. You have to look up their security practices. You have to see whether they've been sued, whether they've had data breaches and all this other stuff. And vendor due diligence, even though I have to do it, is kind of a thorn in my side. I don't love doing it. Kudos to the people who do. But it's very interesting. When we had our initial conversation, one of the things that I brought up to you is, people are going to be doing vendor due diligence on you because they're uploading their Slack data into your
Yeah.
company. Do you have like a DPA? Do you have a privacy policy? Do you have security measures? Like, what does that all look like? And you're like, oh yeah, here's our DPA, here's our privacy policy, here's our security measures. And I'm like, wow, like this company launched like a year ago, which is very recent. And for most companies, when they launch, that is not something that they think about. It's not something that they have. Maybe 10 years down the road, when they hire a compliance person, maybe they'll get it into place. And you guys already had that, which I think is really cool. I think that helps make our lives a lot easier for the compliance folks to just have this in place. Like, I don't have to contact you. It's just all publicly available on your site. So kudos to you on that. I think that's really cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I still have the little bit of, I guess, eagerness to make sure it's in as tip-top shape as possible. I saw a company yesterday that had it in like an actual vendor profile format. I thought that was really nifty too. So I'm always thinking like, what else can I add? What else can we do? And so we're, literally months in, already planning. Is it SOC 2 Type 1 or ISO first, and like starting to get these balls rolling? And I just think, like you said, if we start with security first, it'll be a lot easier later.
Yeah,
And I
for
don't
sure.
think, I don't look at it as an expense. I look at it as an investment in securing our and our
Yeah.
customers' assets. So what could be more valuable?
Yeah, and people look for that, especially with something where you have to like upload things.
Hmm.
People definitely look for that stuff. And, there's always going to be room for improvements. Compliance is never finished, as we say. But it's such a big difference from other companies where you have to search for days to find it, or they don't have it, or I've had the experience of like I have to ask them for it and I get a response like 2 weeks 3 weeks later. Number one, I've already moved on to another product. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not waiting that long to get this information. But also, if a company replies to me is like, oh yeah, these privacy laws don't really apply to us, GDPR doesn't apply, so we don't have this and we're never going to have it. I'm like, oh, nope, not interested.
Hmm.
So just having that information available right away is huge, saves a lot of time. And it also just shows like I can just move through the steps super fast. Like, I immediately like the company a lot more. You know what I mean? Like, I'm immediately like, okay, this is like a legitimate place. So yeah, it's huge, especially for the compliance folks who would be somebody who uses this product. So
Definitely.